You're listening to Malgudi Podcast. "2019 marks 100 years of independence for Afghanistan from the British. When the country was preparing a great celebration, the sense of joy turned to grief with a series of explosions that shook the city of Jalalabad, and suicide attack at Kabul during a wedding ceremony, killing 63 and injuring 200 of them. In today's episode, we are going to see the history, the evolution of Afghan before we can get into India's Afghan policy and the US Taliban peace talks. Here is a brief history of Afghanistan, Afghan and his story. In this episode, you will get a clear understanding on who are the Mujahideen, the Alqaeda, Taliban and the Islam State, and what is their contribution of shaping Afghans' history. Conquered by Dories of Babylonia, Alexander the Great of Macedonia in the ancient period, the 11th century saw Muhammad Ghazni conquering Afghan. Later on, in the 19th century, when the Arab conquerors came to Afghanistan, Islam took its root there. Today's Afghanistan emerged in 1747 when Ahmad Shah, a Pashtun tribe leader, unified all the Pashtun tribes. The Russian Empire's growth threatened British. Hence, the British moved into Afghanistan to secure it as a buffer state. Now, what is a buffer state? It is a country lying between two rival or potentially hostile greater powers. Sometimes, buffer state is mutually demilitarized, not hosting the military of either power. 3 wars were fought by the Afghan with the British to secure independence. They were called the Anglo-Afghan Wars between 1839 and 1919. The first Anglo-Afghan War after the invasion, the British were defeated in 1842 through a massacre of British force in the city of Jalalabad. The second Anglo-Afghan War took place between 1878 and 1880. In 1879, Treaty of Gandamak was signed, where the Britain acquired the right to maintain a resident in Kabul. So basically, Afghan agreed to admit a British resident in Kabul. It gave British control over Afghan's foreign affairs in exchange for protection and subsidy to Afghanistan. The British resident was later massacred and the British troop withdrew from Afghan in 1880. The Third Anglo-Afghan War took place just for a month between May 1919 to June 1919. The new army of Afghan, named Amanullah Khan, attacked the British India. They were repulsed but secured Afghan's independence eventually. On August 19, 1999, they were declared independent. A treaty of Rawalpindi, also known as the Anglo-Afghan Treaty, was signed. The Britain formally recognized independent Afghan. A neutral relationship was ensured. They gave up the control over Afghan's foreign affairs. And by 1934, even the United States of America recognized Afghan as an independent country. Sooner, Pakistan and Afghanistan developed friendship and their borders almost became porous. So Pakistan and Afghan shared a porous border. From the 1950s to the 1970s, during the period of Muhammad Dawood Khan and Zahir, women were given importance and independence to a large extent. The influence of the USSR or the Soviet Union was seen quite a lot. Women had the freedom to go out and also work in universities. During the mid-1960s, the Afghan Communist Party is on rise, where Babrak Karmal and Noor Muhammad Taraki become the leaders. They dethrone Muhammad Dawood Khan, and Noor Muhammad Taraki becomes the president of Afghanistan, whereas Babrak Karmal becomes the prime minister. They proclaim independence from the Soviet Union. They form Afghan policies on the basis of Islamic principles. They stressed on Afghan nationalism, socio-economic justice largely. But later on, they signed a friendship treaty with Soviet. And in the later period, Babrak Karmal becomes a satellite leader or a puppet leader of the Russians. During the mid-1970s, a particular group, largely Pashtuns, who are conservative Islam and ethnic leaders, who were against the Russian influence form a group called Mujahideen. Once Babrak Karmal became the leader of Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, the Soviet influence had become more. People were unhappy because they disregarded tribal practices and religious sentiments of Afghan. They established communist government too quickly. The local resistance was of extreme nature. Mujahideen strongly opposed this political agenda. They were helped by the US, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Britain and China with weapons and ammunition to overthrow Soviet influence. The guerrilla tactics of Mujahideen proved too costly to the Soviets. In 1984, a Saudi national stepped inside Afghanistan. He was none other than Osama bin Laden. The Mujahideens accepted him into Afghanistan, and in 1988 he formed a jihadi group called Alqaeda, or the Base. Their main aim was to continue the holy work of jihad. But the Mujahideens and the Alqaeda had a pact that they could stay in Afghanistan if they did not target US, as US had helped them to overthrow the Russians. The pact was accepted until 1998. Between this, Mujahideen was not a strong group. There were cracks between them. And the group that came out of Mujahideen and formed a separate group came to be known as the Taliban. In 1989, when the USSR itself split, it receded from Afghanistan. So from 1992 to 1996, the Taliban controlled most of the Afghan, except for the northern region. The northern region was controlled by the Northern Alliance. The Northern Alliance is a group formed by the ethnic minority, which included Uzbeks, Tajiks, Hazars, etc. The Taliban in the initial year conjured favor from the public as they wanted a stable rule in the state, and they wanted to get rid of the Mujahideens who were unstable and corrupt. There were 5 main changes in policies that the Taliban brought in. 1. The opium law was outlawed. 2. Crime rate reduction. 3. Curtail employment and education of women. 4. Mandatory burqa and parda, and women had to come out only accompanied by a man of their family. And 5. Favored public execution and amputation. The US refused to recognize Taliban's rule in Afghanistan, and a UN resolution was passed against them. In 1998 is when the WTC, the World Trade Center, is attacked. The 9/11 attack created a kind of commotion between the 3 groups, the Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda and Taliban. The Northern Alliance, taking advantage of this situation, overthrew Taliban from Kabul, and they were moved to Kandahar, and they were overthrown from there also, and basically the Northern Alliance took control of the whole of Afghan by 2001. Post that, NATO takes over Afghan security with the support of the National Council of Afghan. Remember, the National Council of Afghan has a name. It's Loya Zirga. The Loya Zirga then recommended for a new constitution with a president to head and 2 vice presidents to assist, and the official language as Pashtun. Hamid Karzai was elected as the president. But by 2007, again the Taliban became strong, leading to civilian troops of US entering Afghanistan in 2009. But Hamid Karzai in 2012 calls of the Afghan troops of the US, that is, the civilian troops of the US, as they killed 16 civilians. And in 2013, Afghan takes over NATO's security acts. Ashraf Ghani becomes the president, and there is a power sharing. The NATO officially ended its combat mission in Afghanistan in 2013. Today, peace talks are going on between US and the Taliban. There were many formats that took place for the peace talk. We'll see the present Afghan situation with regard to Taliban peace talks, and most importantly, India's Afghan policy in the coming episode. You're listening to Malgudi Podcast.